Hello, my friends. Lori Ashcraft here again, and welcoming you to Viva la Evolution, which is produced by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a part of Crestwood Behavioral Health. So, thanks for joining us. I'm still getting over a cold, so probably be coughing a whole bunch, but you won't get it. That's the good news. Today, our guest is Theresa. And Tereasa is one of the facilitators at Recovery and Resilience Solutions. She's a wonderful facilitator. Some of you have probably had classes from her. Tereasa has a very serene and gentle approach to facilitating, and it just kind of opens people's hearts and lets everything tumble in. So the session with her I recorded a few months ago when we were both in San Diego together. And her story gives us just a wonderful opportunity to look at things related to childhood trauma. So when you listen to her story, you'll hear about some really early childhood trauma. Maybe just one of them would have been okay to get past, but she managed to get 3 or 4 or 5 of them all in one little childhood. Not unusual. A lot of us do that. And pay attention to what helped her move out of that trauma. Basically, it was other people who could believe in her. I want to bring up right now, before I get too much deeper into this, something called ACE. I think you're probably familiar with that. That stands for Adverse Childhood. Ruby's here with her bone. Go away, Ruby. Adverse childhood events. And a lot of studying and research went into developing this ACE process. And it's basically to help figure out what may have contributed to situations that we have as children or as adults or anywhere in between that we're struggling with. And there's a test you can go online and find a whole bunch of stuff on ACE. And if this piques your interest, I would encourage you to do that. In the blog, I have more information for you too, but if you're really interested, go deeper into that. There is a test that has been developed. I'm just going to kind of give you a brief peek at the 10 indicators on the test. This is a test to see the depth of which you have experienced ACE, or adverse childhood events. So, number 1, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you? So that's 1. Next one, did a parent or other adult often push, grab, slap, or throw things at you? 3, did an adult or a person touch or fondle you, or attempt to, or other sexual things? 4, did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? We all need to feel special sometimes, and children really need that. So that's a big one, number 4. 5, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, clothes to wear, had no one to protect you? 6, were your parents ever separated or divorced? 7, was your parent or caretaker pushed, grabbed, slapped, or things thrown at them? 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or used street drugs? 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did household members attempt suicide? 10, did a household member go to prison? So, as you can see, a lot of people can survive one of these, but when they start to stack up, and they tend to do that, they tend to travel together. then it becomes pretty difficult. So keep this in mind. And again, it's in the blog for you. And you can go online also if you want a lot more information. Keep this in mind as you listen to Teresa's story. And then listen to what the mitigating factors were. She talks about her grandmother. There was a person who saw her, who got her, who paid attention to her and loved her. And the other thing she brought to Teresa's life was a sense of spirituality. Now, we've talked all around spirituality here in the last 20-some blogs, but we haven't hit it directly. So we're going to do that soon. I keep having it in mind, and then something pops up and I move off of it. But it's so critical to being able to survive and thrive when you've had any kind of a mental health challenge, to have that spiritual strength available to you. And it doesn't matter a denomination or even you could be a Buddhist, you could be a Christian, you could be a Hindu person, you could be whatever. Just pick something that feels like a path to you and find strength in it. We'll get into this in a lot more depth because as I'm hearing myself talk, I'm realizing how important this is. So anyway, that's what Teresa's grandmother brought to her. Then later she talks a little bit, some teachers reinforced that. Then she talks about a point in time where she realized she had to let go of the things that she thought kept her safe. And in her case, it was a range of OCD kind of behaviors. She realized she had to let go of those if she was going to grow beyond where she wanted to be. Now that's a moment that we all have in our recovery. Regardless of what we're recovering from, we get that moment that what we're doing is not helping us. In fact, it's holding us back. And we have to choose to let go of that. We've talked a lot about that in various podcasts, but you'll hear it so profoundly in Teresa's story. So pay attention to that. And then afterwards, I want to talk with you a little bit about PTSD. We all know what that is. We all talk about that. We all have it somewhere in our past. But there's also PTG, post-traumatic growth. So when we finish with Teresa, I want to spend a little time talking about that. Okay, folks, here we go. Let's see what Teresa has to say. And thank you for joining us. By the way, if you would subscribe, it would really help us out. So just push that little subscribe button. And again, another thank you to our wonderful sponsors. And if anyone else is interested in being a sponsor, we'd love to have you. There's plenty of room, and it's free of any obligation or cost. So, alrighty, here we go. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us today and being willing to share your experience, strength, and hope, and a little bit about your journey.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm happy to be here.
Where would you like to start? Where did your recovery, well, tell us a little bit about who you were before your recovery journey started.
All right, we'll start there.
Yeah.
I was a carefree little sprite sunshine person.
Yeah.
and I was an only child until I was 13, almost 13. And until the age of maybe 6, things in the home were happy and healthy and otherwise okay. And somewhere around that time, my immediate family, which consisted of my parents only, began to, kind of conflict. And that grew into, kind of a violent home situation. Mm-hmm. And so this went on for many years. Mm. But one of the things that, and they were wonderful people independently. It's just that together they were not. And there was some alcohol use with my father and things like that. During that time, I started to develop some behaviors that my maternal grandmother noticed for the first time when I was staying down at their house in Southern California.
6 or 7 then?
I think I was 7.
Okay.
And I was opening and closing cupboards repeatedly, and she, why are you doing that, honey? What do you need out of the cupboard?
Yes.
Long story there short, I was diagnosed with childhood OCD,
Okay.
and the doctor said, she'll grow out of it. It's just childhood. But I didn't grow out of it. And one of the things that started to happen in age 9 or 10, I started to kind of have a focus on using specific numbers. And if I didn't use those specific numbers, some catastrophe was going to happen.
I don't want to have you lose your train here, but I'm just thinking, just for the sake of our audience, let's just say a little bit about what OCD stands for and what the indicators are so they can follow us closely.
Okay, thank you. So obsessive compulsive disorder.
Okay.
And it can come in childhood or it can come later. When the doctor diagnosed me with it, he said, "Oh, it's just the childhood piece, and it'll disappear." And oftentimes it has to do with thoughts that are so intrusive and repetitive and anxiety producing that you have to do certain things. Yeah. And in my case, what I ended up learning many years later was that, my parents, in the middle of their arguing, they had the wherewithal to send me to either my grandparents' house or my aunt and uncle's house when the fighting got really bad. The challenge during the times that I was sent away was that I didn't know what was happening at home. And I had watched my parents fighting escalate and the drinking, and so I didn't know if they were going to be alive when I got home.
Oh gosh.
So I had this whole thing of, are they going to be alive when I get home? We're going to have a family, or maybe they're going to leave.
What a burden to carry for a little kid.
It kind of was. And these so the obsessive thoughts, as the OCD, obsessive, that revolved around someone dying. So if I didn't do this, that, or the other things, somebody was going to die. It was usually one of my parents.
I get it.
Yeah. So for me, it manifested in the form of numbers and how things were positioned exactly. And I started to not use specific numbers that I thought were problematic, right? And what happened was, and here comes kind of, I think in recovery, we have these little aha moments. In about 4th or 5th grade, I noticed that I kind of realized, well, if I'm not using these numbers, I'm going to fail tests. Like, you have to use all the numbers.
Yeah.
Right? And so
just again, let's for our audience, with OCD, reason and logic doesn't come into it. It's just such a strong compulsion that it overtakes any other thought processes.
the logic and the reason is there, and,
yes, it's
and
just,
part of you is looking at yourself like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you know better than this. But knowing better isn't where that experience lives, right? And so I realized, I'm gonna have to get all my courage together and step into this fire, really, face those fears and do what I need to do to get through school. And that was, even though I didn't know it and I had some step backs and, on the journey, but I think that was one start for me, because I stepped into that fire and did some of those things that those kind of obsessive thoughts were forbidding me to do, and nobody died.
yes.
It wasn't a catastrophe.
So that's a really good thing to know. I think that's good information for people who might be struggling with this, to take it on.
Yeah.
Basically is what you're saying.
Take
to
it
challenge
on.
it.
Mhm.
Yes.
And that's why traditionally, cognitive behavioral therapy was so supportive with OCD. But the thing about that diagnosis that I've discovered in my life is it's very stigmatized, because I remember, the feelings of embarrassment and shame that go along with, well, I don't know why I'm doing this or not using that number, repeating these actions, or you hide. There's a hiding component to it. Yeah. And, one of the things about that recovery process for me that was so amazing are just the people along the way. My paternal grandmother being one of them. She is the one whose house, I was sent to. And she was kind of the seat of where I began my spiritual journey. She was the matriarch of the family, and she was very, very Catholic. Novenas, rosaries, statues all over the house. But she would sit me on her lap, and she would be praying either the rosary or whatever she was praying at the moment, and I could literally feel love, like just infusing, just flowing from her.
What a powerful healing gift. Yes.
And I think, for me, that spiritual component in my recovery has been key, because I learned what reverence was before I even understood the word respect, because it was that experience and energy of love.
Yeah.
And love and acceptance and reverence for the journey of life. There's a certain kind of bowing down to life, if you will, and all of its challenges that go into one's recovery and resilience, I think, at least for me in my experience.
I think that's common ground.
Yeah. In addition, teachers of all forms, teachers in school, teachers in college, teachers at a bus stop, strangers, were just really powerful throughout my life. I was so blessed with teachers in different forms. And, I found my way to this work, or this field, rather, the field of mental health, right, in 2001. And I was working for, at the time, it was Catholic Healthcare West.
And what were you doing there?
I saw a newspaper advertisement for a recreation assistant, and I just wanted to get my door in the field, and I thought, I'll do that. And I show up for this interview, and I'm just so nervous. And the administrator said, well, I think you'd be better suited as a case manager. And so that was my first position, was a case manager.
You'd completed college or something by then?
I had.
Okay. Yeah. And what was your major?
It was philosophy and a minor in Latin, believe it or not.
It probably equipped you as well as anything.
Probably. And so in that setting, and it was an acute psychiatric setting, and each case manager was assigned a doctor, and so you'd kind of follow the doctor around,
right?
While he did his rounds, and I was introduced to facilitation for the first time by way of, here's this manual on DBT. Go into that group and teach it.
DBT is
dialectical behavior therapy.
And it's a process of, let's just call it coping skills, learning skills.
It's coping skills and it's learning skills with the added element of mindfulness, which I had not been introduced to before. And that was my first nugget, was the concept of mindfulness and how powerful it can be in this work. And what I discovered at that time, as I was getting used to working in this field, is that nobody talked about recovery.
What year was this?
2001.
The conversation was just beginning, I would say, in mainstream settings. Just beginning.
And so I didn't know much about it. There was talk of recovery in substance use.
Substance, of course.
Right.
In fact, if you said recovery in a mental health setting,
It was assumed.
they would automatically think you were talking about substance.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Because we didn't have that word. We didn't have that belief, much less the word.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And as I was in my 20s, and I was kind of, it was a formative period for me, really, in this work. And I left after 5 years because my 20-something-year-old mind said, well, I don't really see people changing their lives, and I guess I must not be doing something right. So
That is so common.
I'm going to go.
Yeah. Because you weren't using recovery methodologies.
Right.
So, of course, people weren't recovering. And you're just bringing up such a good point, Theresa, because often we think it's just the person being served that's struggling. But when the helping person doesn't see the person getting better, just like you're saying, a beautiful example, you feel like I must be doing this wrong, or I'm not doing it good enough, or even worse, it's their fault for not getting better. Either way, whatever story you tell yourself, it's bathed in a sense of failure and even a little bit of shame going on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that coin, I think, is stigma among mental health professionals.
Yes.
Because one of the things that I've seen over my time in this field is someone who's been at the same center, the same level of care for 30 years. And I remember one of the doctors that I worked with at Catholic Healthcare West when I first started was just said, bless his heart, he was just kind of a curmudgeon. and he was cold with his patients, and he was cold with me, and he was cold with the nurses. And in this work, in peer support, I now understand that, he was in that setting. He didn't even do outpatient. He was in an acute psychiatric setting for 25, 30 years. Never saw people in their well moments. He saw them at their most unwell moments.
This is called the clinician's dilemma.
Yeah.
when all you see is the illness part, you think that's all there is because you're not exposed to, which is one of the reasons that what you do now is so important, training peers, to go back in, then clinicians can see, oh, somebody does get well.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So after I left there, fast forward a little bit, I worked in nonprofit, ran a small business, some other things, and came back to this field in the form of Crestwood.
What was your job?
I was hired as a service coordinator, and then I was campus educator for a while.
Yeah.
And then I had the joy and privilege of joining the RRS team, which is where I'm here now.
They stole you. It
Stole me, and I'm so happy because one of the things I didn't say about that first position way back in 2001 is that I actually fell in love with facilitating. They threw me into the group, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I was terrified.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I hit this stride with it, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
this is amazing,
Great. Yeah.
And so I've always really enjoyed that. But coming into Crestwood, I didn't get an orientation. I was hired up at Eureka, which was just a, way out in kind of the boonies of California.
You didn't hear that, Eureka.
It was a wonderful campus. But at the time in 2014 when I was hired, there was nobody to do orientation.
Okay.
And so they sat me down and they put these tapes in and they said, watch these videos. These are from a conference.
Oh.
And I have to say, that was such a gift. It was more of a gift than any orientation I possibly could have gotten, because I saw some of the leaders in our community at Crestwood. And I I remember sitting there watching that with tears running down.
Yeah.
It still makes me
Yeah.
emotional because I realized these people know what recovery is. These people know what love is, and this is home. And so I really kind of started my journey at Crestwood with that inspiration and that fire, and now it's almost 10 years later.
Wow.
And you can see the tears in my eyes. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
you know, and it's even more so because I've moved into this wonderful position with RRS where I get to facilitate every single day and share hope, recovery, resilience, empowerment, love, all of these things. And so my hopes and dreams for the future are to continue this work. And I would love to see this work really branch into schools, emergency rooms, the justice system.
I would love us to get back into the justice system. We did a lot of that in Phoenix, in Pennsylvania. We actually trained peer support in every prison in Pennsylvania. And I think of all the training I've done in all the places, I think I was more moved by those programs. Chris Martin and I did a lot of work there. And Gloriana did a lot of work there. I just remember people saying, this is the first time anybody ever gave me a chance. The first time anyone ever told me about hope. The first time anybody ever saw me. You know, I just get teary remembering it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we had a graduation here a couple of days ago. I just cried all the way home, just being so moved by seeing people's lives change.
Absolutely. And I think one of the keys for me in this work and working within Crestwood is just the relationship. Because Crestwood has that centrally, you know, and
It's a
and
value.
we have that centrally
Yeah.
in this work every day.
Yes.
So
Well,
key.
thank you so much for taking time out to share your story with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a delight to hear your story again.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Well, okay, my dears, there you have it, Teresa's story. And Theresa, thank you so much for being willing to share this with us. Yeah. And if you ever take a class from Theresa, you will love it. I just want to assure you of that. And if you want to look at the RRS classes, just go on our webpage. You'll see a whole bunch of stuff there. That some of it's free, a lot of free stuff, and then there's other things you can do. Sign up for. We'd love to have you. But what I really want to talk to you about right now is post-traumatic growth, because there's been a lot of studies done on this just in the last, oh gosh, I would say 15 years. And interest in it really kicked up with the wars we've been in the last 20 years. Because people would come back from being on the battlefield and have PTSD. And in the past, before we started looking at post-traumatic growth, we just thought, well, there you go. We can think of some things you might want to do that might help, but we didn't really get to the point of talking about how you could really grow. It was there in the early literature, but it wasn't. Nobody splashed it around. But in the last 20 years, it's really hit the mainstream. And I just want to credit Martin Seligman for bringing this to light. Google Martin Seligman, positive psychology. He is one of my main mentors. He's just an amazing guy. we could go on and on, but I won't, about Martin Seligman. But anyway, post-traumatic growth, what the researchers started to find is that when you had a terrible experience, that a lot of people slowly got over it, and got past it. Not a lot, but some people did that. A lot of people got a little bit over it and then just stuck there at that place, stuck somewhere along the line of getting over it. So they started looking at who are these people that are getting over it. And they were the people that were able to take that experience and learn from it. In other words, they didn't go into it going, oh my gosh, I had this terrible experience. I'll never be the same. They went into it going like, that was awful. I don't want to do that again. What can I learn from this? How can I take what happened there and learn from it and grow from it? A lot of that's not even conscious, but some of it's conscious. Those are the folks that could get over it. So then the researchers start putting together, okay, how can we help other people hold it in that light and move past trauma? That's post-traumatic growth. I just, and I started reading about this probably, 20, 15 years ago, because I love Martin Seligman. He was writing all about it. And I just realized that in my own experience, I probably would have flunked the ACE test, but it didn't, I kind of got over it. And part of my own personal survival is I've got to get over it or I can't go on. So some of the ways I got over were not like one. Here's the problem: addictions. People try to get over these things with addictions, and that just makes things worse. So one of the things I did that I thought to get over was I overate. I ate everything, and that only made everything worse. So addictions don't help you get over it. So then you have to put the addiction down, and then you have to go deeper and look at how to move past some of this stuff. So I just want to leave on this cheery note of we can get over this stuff. We don't have to hide behind it. We don't have to go, oh, I have PTSD. I can't do this. I can't do that. I just want to say, stop that. Remember who you are. You're an amazing human being. You can get over it, and we can move on. You can make an amazing contribution. Okay, I'll stop doing that now. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. It's really wonderful to have you here each week. And we'll see you next week. And soon, I don't think next week, but maybe the week after, we're having Raul Almanzar as our guest. And he is a nationally recognized expert in trauma. So he'll take us a lot deeper than we went today, but we just kind of opened the door a little bit today. So stay tuned. Okay, love you lots and see you next time.